Welcome to the ISM New Jersey webinar series. Many thanks to all of our attendees for attending today, and from also all of our ISM chapter attendees who are joining us. And we'd like to do a shout out to Dallas, Denver, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, and Eastern Virginia for joining us for today's program. We will be recording this program and we will post it on our YouTube channel. You can always subscribe to our YouTube channel so that anytime anything gets posted to our channel, will get a notification of the new content that is listed there. If you have any questions for today for our speaker, please use the chat or the Q&A tab to insert your question, and we will answer those questions at the end of the program. Now on to our featured program for today. Please welcome our speaker for today, Brandon Hummons, who is a consultant with Corcentric's Source to Pay Consulting Group, contributing to strategic sourcing engagements within the IT and telecom category. Brandon services a wide range of clients from therapeutic manufacturers to hospitality providers. He also works closely with the head of IT departments to assist in the prioritization and planning of key IT sourcing initiatives, execution of high-value purchasing projects, and the review of negotiation of the organization's strategic partner relationships. In addition, Brandon has strong passions for improving the collaboration between teams, advancing the tools and functions within procurement departments, advocating for supplier diversity programs across industries, and providing more career opportunities to diverse and minority groups. Brandon graduated from Denison University with a BA in economics. He also received the 2019 Mega 30 Under 30 Award from ISM and is the 2020 Rising Shelley Award recipient from ISM Chicago. Brandon also has his CPSM and his CPSD. At this point, I'd like to turn the program over to Brandon.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much, Kathy, for that introduction. I am super excited for this presentation today. It's around utilizing third parties and partners to negotiate contracts. And I put this together because I recently went through a number of negotiations utilizing these third parties and partners. And there's a lot that I learned from that experience that I hope that you guys gain a lot out of today. So with that being said, I have a couple slides that I would like to cover. There's going to be a lot of information packed in these few slides, so feel free to jot down your questions, ask about them. I'm going to be most excited about a case study that we have, but with that being said, let's jump into the agenda here. So first, we're going to go over what are third parties and partners, like who are these people that are helping us out with these negotiations. Next, we're going to go over how to properly prepare and what the collaboration looks like. And then third, we're going to focus on the actual negotiations. There are going to be some really good tips and tricks around how to work with that party on doing that. And then you'll also probably hear some things you've heard before around how to negotiate and gain the proper leverage within those negotiations. Fourth, I have a case study on Microsoft. So Microsoft was one of the bigger negotiations that I did utilizing a partner. If anyone has ever negotiated with Microsoft before, you understand that it's a completely complicated, convoluted process of tons of numbers and products and a bunch of stuff all thrown into a pot that can be very confusing to any buyer. So we're going to walk through what makes those successful and what can actually get you into a little bit of trouble. Lastly, we're going to talk about how to close these projects off and how to perform any sort of post-project analysis. Now remember, we only have around an hour or so. I'll try to keep it to around 45 minutes so that we have enough time for questions at the end. But with that being said, let's jump into an overview of these third parties and partners. So, what are third parties and partners? Third-party partners essentially negotiate on your behalf. They are companies that are typically the primary source of somebody that that works directly with the supplier. So, for example, before I gave the example of Microsoft. Microsoft typically doesn't negotiate directly with their buyers. And if they do, they typically put that buyer at a huge disadvantage. So in many situations, depending on the volume of the purchase, you're going to have companies like Microsoft or Oracle or Adobe or storage companies. And I'm primarily talking about the IT field here because that's usually where it plays the most relevance at. But it also works into manufacturers who say that you have to go through an aggregator or other companies that pretty much help facilitate your buying process. So these third-party partners negotiate on your behalf. They typically should be unbiased in their negotiations, and they consistently work with key suppliers in the industry. Some third-party partners only work with one supplier. Some of them have numerous. I think maybe some of you have heard of companies called like Software One or ClearEdge, who have a ton of industry knowledge around a specific number of suppliers in certain categories. These partners just have that extra information, which leads me on to the next part, which is that they do possess that specific industry or market information. This is primarily because unlike if one company negotiates with one of these larger companies, they only have the data that they can either gather from public sources or sources like Gartner. But these other companies, like these third-party partners, have information that they've been able to gather throughout a number of years working with hundreds of different clients so that they can properly understand and say, all right, one client purchased we put it in the small category. Here are the discounts that they were able to achieve. Here are the value add parameters that they were able to achieve. And there's that specific market information that they only have access to. In addition, I work for a company called CoreCentric. We have clients across the country, and because we're able to work with so many diverse clients, we also have that certain market information that if you're just a company on your own with your own internal sourcing department, you may not be privy to. So that's one of the advantages of third-party partners. Lastly, they have a strong understanding of the negotiation levers. So as I said before, they don't just work with one group of buying, they work with all sorts. So for example, CoreCentric, we have clients in therapeutics, manufacturing, utilities, all across the board. And that allows us to understand, all right, if we reduce spend, what does that do to our negotiating leverage? If we improve or increase the number of products in X category, what does that do? Overall, what third-party partners are able to accomplish in these situations is that they provide the missing piece that certain purchasing organizations may not have as they are stepping into those negotiations. You never want to be at a disadvantage. Now, third-party partners are not going to be right for every situation. There are going to be certain times when it's going to be better for your particular organization just to handle it yourself, not utilize anyone else, and just get the deal done. Often, that's going to be when the deal is less complex, there's going to be a lower amount of spend, and there's going to be lower risk to your organization if you get it wrong. You don't want to step into a situation where it's going to impact virtually every employee within your company, and you're walking in with a disadvantage of that information. So with that being said, let's talk about how you can prepare and properly collaborate with these third-party partners and as you go into the negotiations. One thing that I will say before we get started on this slide is that the preparation that I'm talking about here is preparation that you should be doing in as many of the negotiations as you enter as possible. It does not only need to be when you're utilizing a partner or a third party. So the first thing is know your organization footprint. I'm going to really pause on that one. Knowing your footprint, knowing what your deals should look like before you go into an organization will instantly, at least at the bare minimum, put you at level playing field with your competition, with your supplier that you're negotiating against. The main reason for this is imagine walking into a negotiation, and many of us do this, right? We'll ask the supplier, give me all the contracts that you have under your database. Let me know exactly what I'm purchasing. Let me figure out who else in my organization is contacting me. Not all the time is that the wrong move, but if you're doing that as your first data gathering step, you may be making a mistake because what you're doing is you're signaling and you're conditioning the supplier to say you don't have it all together. Most suppliers are not going to do something like lie to you and say, here you're not purchasing enough, or you're purchasing too much. But what they will do is they will understand that you don't have a full grip on everything. So if they have the insight that you may want to cancel something, but you may not know that it's there, what they may do is position themselves to be in a position to advance the value of what you may not know is there. So a quick example of this, let's say you're working with a company like Assurion, right? They do insurance for all types of mobile devices, right? And you want to negotiate for better rates on the insurance for all the devices that your company carries. And you go in and you say, give me our entire footprint. And you do this without exactly knowing what your footprint is. Now, they could say in the back of their minds, right, that you may be thinking about canceling extended device coverage on executive devices, right? You haven't used it, there's an extremely low number of claims, and you're not really getting the value out of it that you're paying for. You might do the financial analysis on it and say, if I were to just pay for the extended coverage per device as it comes up, I'm going to get a better value. So they may recognize that and then walk into the negotiations already having the value propositions to keep your company overpaying and buying more than what it needs to. Let's take another example, as I said before, with Microsoft, as we'll see in a second here. Asking for your footprint without knowing it puts you in a position for Microsoft to then gear you toward higher cost items that if you don't know your utilization, you may not know that you don't need those higher cost packages. So just knowing your footprint before you walk into that negotiation is going to be key. Now, asking the question to the supplier, if this is an incumbent supplier, about what your footprint is also going to be important, mainly because you can do an audit that says, here's what I believe I'm using, here's what I believe is deployed, here's what I believe we're under contract for, let's confirm. Oh, I thought we only had these 20 contracts in place. I'm finding 5 more because I had managers in several departments across the industry. It may be the product development team, the marketing team. They went out and they did their own contracts that you were not aware of. So by saying, I know this spend is under good management and I have 5 rogue contracts out there, will allow you to step into that negotiation with that much knowledge and purchasing power as you begin to negotiate with that supplier. The second thing is knowing your needs versus your wants. So there are, especially during times of COVID, a close scrutiny on the budgets right now, right? So if you can properly identify before going into that conversation, here are the things I need to make sure I'm walking out of in this conversation. I need to ensure that I'm getting A, B, and C off the table, right? These are the things I need to buy. On the flip side, it would be nice to have X, Y, and Z components added as either supplementary products or something that can be bundled in with the things that we need. A quick example of this, let's say, for example, you're working with Oracle, right? They may have core products within their purchasing management software that they say, hey, your company absolutely needs these things, and then you agree. And then as you're looking through their other offerings, you're saying, well, I would really like this analytics tool added to my bundle. And when you place a value on that for yourself, right, because we're conditioning our suppliers that says our value of this additional analytics module is low, how much are you willing to do? You know, how much would you be willing to charge to add that into the current bundle, considering we may already be purchasing this large package here? You may be able to put yourself in a position to say, I'm not going to overpay for it. They may be willing to offer discounts up to 70% for it, whatever have you, but you've already been able to condition your supplier and say, I'm not going to overpay for things that I want, but I don't need. Then you need to understand the goal that you're walking into the negotiation with, as well as some of your benchmark data. So if you're walking into a negotiation, you need to understand, if I'm being charged, for example, $400,000 for an enterprise license for from X supplier, the goal there is that, one, all the employees have everything that they need to do their job as it relates to this solution. The next piece is I need to make sure that the budget is under that $400,000 mark. And then what I'm also going to do is utilize benchmark data And this could be setting you up now to work with that partner. I need to then use benchmark data to say, what is the typical discount from list price that I should be getting for this solution? Now, once again, this doesn't just need, I'm an IT consultant, as what was said in the introduction, but it doesn't just need to be in the IT space. In the past, I've been outside of the IT roles. I've been in professional services, data management, claims data management, as well as direct material sourcing. So let's take direct material sourcing, for example. A lot of the time, it's going to be based on volume, logistics, how much you're willing to pay for the shipping and the insurance on that. There are all these different components when it comes to a direct materials. And what you need to do is understand what is the goal that you're walking into that conversation with, in terms of, is our goal to get the shipping covered by the supplier? Is the goal to have the supplier cover the insurance while it's in transit? And we don't want to cover anything until it gets to our warehouse, right? Maybe that's a goal of your negotiation, because we're not just going to focus on the direct cost, but we're focusing on everything peripheral to it. If I'm moving too fast, I'm sorry about that. We only have a couple minutes for this. This could be a 2-day session, right? But think about your goals as you're walking into that. And then going back to direct materials, utilize that benchmark data that says, for my region, right? I'm in the Northeast coast. I have a company around this size. Here's what we should be paying for copper if we're ordering it from XYZ suppliers on this sort of basis. Utilize that benchmark data to align to your goals so that you have a clear understanding of the negotiation outcomes that you're looking to achieve. The last part here for preparation is always start early. I know it may be a simple thing where it says, hey, we only plan for this negotiation to take us a month. Start 3 months earlier, so that if you're in the event where your scope changes or your suppliers run into a problem, we ran into many problems with COVID, getting direct materials from China, and in many situations where something that may have taken 3 weeks in the past all of a sudden took 3 months. We can't predict the future, so it's always going to be better to start early. And in addition, let's take it back to IT sourcing. If you have companies that audit your company and need to do things called true-ups, so they need to examine their current usage and align that to your future usage, and to make sure that your contract aligns to the number of people that are licensed to use it, you may need more time to align to their cycle to true up and to align usage to contract terms. Then you may need to negotiate the contract. You may only need 4 months to negotiate the contract, but the true up occurs in month 6. So how do we properly align the timing of that to make sure that we're not going to be overpaying or being hit with any sort of fees during the negotiation or as we're going through renewals? The best way to handle that is simply by starting early. Now, as you've been preparing for this conversation, you've got all your data together, you understand your goals, you understand your needs and wants, you understand what you want to get out of the negotiation, and you're starting early. Now you realize that you want to utilize a partner to help you out with this negotiation. This could be for a number of reasons, as I said before. Perhaps you don't have a strong procurement organization with a high level of expertise. Maybe you're sourcing something for the first time and simply want a partner to guide you along the process. One of the things that you need to understand is, are they a partner or are they an imposter? Not every third-party partner out there that says they can negotiate these contracts on your behalf are going to be doing it unbiased, nor will they be doing it with your complete best interest in mind. So that brings us to our first point. Understand the goals and objectives of the partner. And what that means is, what is going to be their primary outcome? Are they going to be working with you based on a flat fee? Are they going to be working with you based and being paid on a percentage of the amount of dollars they save you? Are you saying to them, hey, your outcome and your KPIs are going to be based on if you're able to achieve these key objectives, such as getting us XYZ software, having it agree to be implemented by a certain amount of time, and making sure that our contract terms are best in class? What are their goals and objectives? Because that's going to be key in facilitating how they handle your negotiation. Ideally, the partner functions as an extension of your procurement team. So their goals and objectives are aligned to yours. Now, there are going to be other situations where they could be open and honest with you and say, hey, our goals and our objectives are to help the supplier and to help the customer. We help the supplier by ensuring that we transfer enough people from their perpetual or subscription-based licenses over to a new license structure that they're trying to move their clients over to. Or their goal could be, hey, we want to, let's say a telecom company, for example, we want to move everyone off of landline and POTS line and the traditional stuff to voice over IP. That is our goal. We're helping, telecom companies do that. And in the long run, it'll save you money, it'll save them money, both sides win. Not all of these things are going to be bad, not all of them are going to be good, but we need to understand what that looks like. The next thing is evaluate your partner as you would evaluate a supplier. Understand their rate of success. How many times have they entered into this negotiation style? How many times have they been successful? What is the average savings that they've been able to deliver to their clients? And what types of clients have they worked with in the past? You don't want to be the first, one and only, or the biggest client in someone's portfolio. You need to make sure that they're working with companies of your similar size, handling deals that you're familiar with, or at least around the size that your company is expecting. The next thing is ask about the timing and the incentives. So some partners, if they facilitate certain transactions, they will get rebates based on what they were able to help the supplier sell. So I'm giving you a lot of industry secrets. Once again, this is I'm an IT consultant, so I'm going to bring up a lot of IT examples. There are companies out there that facilitate transactions between Cisco, for example. Cisco sells network gear. They allow for some of the telecommuting that we typically have to do nowadays. Like right now, I'm in my virtual office. Cisco sometimes handles the video that goes along with that. But often they don't sell directly to buyers, right? They typically utilize a reseller. And resellers in many situations can be looked at as partners, right? So for these situations, there may be incentives that these resellers or partners are given in order to sell certain things. So like, let's say, for example, you're doing a materials or a hardware purchase and you're utilizing a partner. They may get incentives for selling you certain types of hardware or material over others. And their knowledge and expertise could say, hey, I'm walking in and I need XYZ cable for all of my storage units. Oh, well, you don't really need that cable. This other cable works just as good and you'll be just as satisfied with it. This may very well be true, but they may be getting an incentive to switch you from that one product to the other. So these are questions that you need to ask your partner in order to ensure that you're getting an unbiased opinion. Now, just because they're getting an incentive does not mean it's the wrong move for your company. It could still be the right thing. This is just information that you need to know. The next thing is perform validation of the opinions of their licensing models, right? So think about opinions and licensing. So what this means is your partner is going to have a certain knowledge skill set that you need to verify and validate, right? So like, let's say, for example, we're going back to hardware purchases, as I just said before, and you have you're building off a new, everybody's returning to office, for example, right? Everybody's coming back from COVID, they're getting back into the offices, and you need to, as a facilities manager, understand how many desks need to get in place and what structures need to be built so that we can properly be in a safe environment, right? You have a partner that's going to help you purchase these things. They're going to help you source it out and find the right suppliers to make this happen. And they promise certain discounts based on the relationships that they have with 5 different vendors in the industry. One of the things that you need to do is do a knowledge check, right? And say, hey, what do you understand about facilities? What do you understand about infrastructures? Do you understand the process that it takes to go through and make sure that we have a good implementation with the entire project from start to finish? Do an actual validation of their knowledge, understand their opinions. Their opinions may differ. You may learn something through these conversations, but you need to make sure that your partner is going to be functioning best in class in the situation. The next thing that's going to be really important is that you stop any divide and conquer attempts. This is not going to be specific to partners, but it is something that you need to look at across the board. Suppliers are going to know who in your company they should be going to in order to close a deal, whether this is going to be the head of purchasing or the head of a certain department that's where the budget's coming from. They're going to know how to say, hey, I've already talked to John over in marketing. He said that this is good. Why are you still negotiating with me in procurement? You need to stop that and make sure that as you're introducing a partner, that still you're directing everyone to the right point of contact so that they cannot divide your organization to get deals secured outside of your purview, outside of your perspective, and essentially lessening and destroying your negotiating leverage down the line. Lastly, which is somewhat of a extension of the last point, identify all supplier touch points. So there will be moments when you say, hey, supplier, only work with our partner, and then the partner will work with me as I manage their performance throughout this project. And you can specify and say, hey, don't contact anybody else in procurement directly, don't contact anybody else in the organization, and only work with this one contact within our partner organization. So that's going to be very important to identify. The last piece here is if you're working with a partner that also functions as a reseller, identify any markups. Understand that if they're buying, let's go back to the Cisco example. If they're buying something from Cisco, figure out how much they're marking that up before you get it. Understand if, as they're buying it from Cisco, what sort of discounts are they hit with before they actually pass the cost to you. And then lastly, understand if they're getting any rebates from that. In many situations, companies don't know that if they're working with a reseller or a partner, that they can ask for that partner or reseller to share the rebates. The next thing is you can choose a partner based on the amount that they're marking their products up and the discounts that they're providing. So like, let's say, for example, you want to buy computer systems directly from HP, right? HP is going to have their list price that you can get. You can get the list price directly from HP. And then from there, you can understand if you're working with a number of different partners, how much are these partners marking it up? What discounts is each partner getting from HP? And what's the rebate that they're getting? That's a lot of work for your internal procurement organization to do, but it's going to help you do that analysis better so that you're getting the best value for what you're purchasing. Once again, there are a lot of companies out there that do it. This is something that CoreCentric does all the time. We do help our clients figure out how to get this best value. It is extremely complicated sometimes to kind of go through this process. So just ensure that you're walking into those engagements and those activities with the right amount of knowledge under your sleeve first. Last two pieces on the slide is just a few tips. Allowing a supplier to gain the advantage by having the lead in your organization's knowledge results in overpayment and misaligned values. So really all this means is that without understanding fully all the different components of your organization and what you're planning to buy, you're most likely going to overpay something for something that you don't fully understand the value of. What this means is that you may not fully understand what a software solution can do for you, all of the different components. Maybe it's doing more than you need it to do, and therefore you're going to overpay for something that you don't need. Lastly, ensure that the values of the partner and the values of the organization are identical. Like many companies out there, you need to make sure that whoever you're choosing, they are essentially functioning as an extension of your procurement organization whenever you're utilizing a partner like this. Partners should never display a bias for the supplier results. They should never encourage you to just purchase more for the sake of purchasing more to save more. They should never have too much sympathy for a supplier. They should also never beat a supplier over the head over price or anything like that. You don't want to be the cheapest one in someone's portfolio, but at the same time, your values need to be aligned with your partner values. The next piece here, my presentation would move on, there we go, is a few tips around negotiation and action. So I divide this out into three pieces. There's the internal analysis, there's the cost analysis, and then there is the buying process. Some of this will be renditions of what we just talked about. Other pieces are going to be a little bit new for us. But the first point here, somewhat as we mentioned in the past, is that you need to identify the pain points, right? So as we're figuring out, going through the negotiation process and trying to put value propositions in front of the supplier, identify pain points. Where in the process, what are employees experiencing, or what are customers experiencing that is very, very difficult for them to endure, right? The next piece is, which opportunities are better for an incumbent supplier? This is relatively standard, right? If we're going through a sourcing exercise, it's always a situation of, do we hate our incumbent or do we love them? Do we have more opportunities for them? Should we take more opportunities away from them? And that really leads to the next point, which opportunities are for new suppliers, right? So we have the incumbent side, the new supplier side, and we need to figure out through a roadmap process, so specifying that roadmap plan, which opportunities should stay with our current suppliers, which one should go, and this is going to help us figure out how we can walk into those negotiations. You may enter into an RFP process with an incumbent participating and have no plans of keeping that incumbent in place. You may do that for a number of different reasons. One, you may just give them that one last chance, that one last hurrah for that supplier to say, hey, let me put my best foot forward. I didn't understand your pain points before. Thanks for communicating with me. We're going to turn it around completely. That could be a really good reason for putting an incumbent into an RFP, even if you don't go into that RFP expecting that they'll win. And then the next piece here is understanding the opportunities for the new suppliers. Are these new products, new specifications that no one else has touched before, that you're saying, we don't want an incumbent to touch it, we want someone brand new to handle this brand new initiative? This all needs to be figured out, and this needs to be done through a roadmap prior to going into that negotiation. And to me, this next point around the growth plan is most important. So let's go to another example of material sourcing or hardware sourcing, for example. As I said before, you could be planning on purchasing new laptops and new ThinkPads for your entire organization. Every employee gets one from HP, right? And HP says, all right, well, we're going to give you a discount on the first 50,000. You know, you have a huge organization, everybody needs a couple of these, right? We're going to give you a discount on the first 50,000, and this will last you over the next 3 years. And we're going to give you automatic hardware and software updates to be applied to each of the devices under your care. And then you say, all right, well, this 50,000, you know, because we're going to need around that amount to just cover everybody. There's 25,000 are going to be computers, 25,000 are going to be tablets. But next year, we plan on a merger that's going to introduce an additional 10,000 workforce members to the organization. We're going to grow by 10,000 members. And through that growth plan, you could negotiate with HP that says, hey, instead of giving me a volume discount on 50,000 units, I want a volume discount up front on 60,000, because in year 2, we plan on increasing by that 10,000, and I want the term discount of the contract to apply to the initial purchase. And I also want to maintain my discount in year 2 as we onboard those new devices. I don't want to purchase that additional 10,000 now. I don't need them. The employees aren't here, but I want this to be in place when the merger is complete. Now, what if the merger doesn't get completed? Well, let's build in some protection of the contract that say, hey, if we don't do the merger and we don't add the 10,000, we'll pay back or give you a rebate based on the discount difference that we gave you between that 50,000 and that 60,000. So if you see what I did there, as I said, hey, we're not going to forfeit our entire discount. We're just going to go back to the original discount if we had only purchased 50,000 units. So that's a really important strategy that many people can use in any numbers game with a supplier when you have an accurate growth plan. This could be for, you know, growing the number of employees, extending the number of offices, whatever that's in there that says, hey, we plan on growing. Now, on the flip side, what you might want to watch out for is plans of reduction. You know, let's say, for example, you know that a part of the company is about to get sold off. You're going to only need a certain number of units or a certain amount of support for something for a certain number of years. That strategy there is simply timing out the terms and the changes in that. And when I say terms, I mean the length of the contract. So it's like, hey, we plan on selling off this division in 2 years. let's only set the contract for 2 years. Let's get as much of a discount right now before we reduce our quantity. From there, we could aim to extend the agreement with a lower quantity and keep the discounts and efforts of good faith and trying to maintain a good relationship with the supplier. But often those are going to be the trickier situations. No one likes to hear that they're going to be getting less money and still giving you the same discount. So understanding that growth plan before you walk into those negotiations is going to be critical. And the next piece here is cost analysis. And here's a few tips and tricks on how to get the best cost analysis for your internal procurement organizations. It's one, creating pricing scenarios for the supplier. And what this means is it's not necessarily tricking the supplier, but it's presenting yourself with options, right? So like, let's say, for example, we're going back to the HP computer purchasing situation, right? One of the things that's going to be very difficult, especially when you're in situations, once again, utilizing a partner where HP is giving you a list price, right? They're saying, and no one, by the way, don't buy anything list price. You're going to overpay if they say, hey, here's the price on the online. You want 10,000 units of that, buy it at list price. You're going to massively overpay. I can guarantee you that for certain situations, the minimum discount that you could see is 5%. And it ranges depending on the size of the deal, your organization structure, your type, all the way up to 75%. So imagine getting 75% off of a hardware list price, and your company had been before purchasing it at list price. So I will say that first, don't ever purchase at list price. But the way that you can figure out some of the strategies to negotiate better is creating pricing scenarios. Right? So like, let's say, for example, you're working with a partner and you can ask your partner to say, hey, I want you to work with HP, go out there and find situations where I'm purchasing 10,000 units in year 1, 10,000 in year 2, 10,000 in year 3. Create that pricing scenario for me and let's see what sort of discounts we can get. Now create another scenario for me where I'm purchasing 30,000 units in year 1. What does that look like? All right, let's create a third pricing scenario where we're purchasing 15 units in year 1, 15 units in year 2, and an additional protections and warranties in year 3. So I think you understand what I'm getting at right now is that you're creating options for yourself that all achieve the goals that you walked into the negotiation with. And so by doing this, you're going to unlock more pricing transparency. And you're going to be able to utilize those cost levers. So maybe through this, you figure out and you say, volume differences and timing of those volume differences aren't making a big impact on my final cost. Maybe it's the specifications of the hardware that I need to focus on. So maybe instead of touch screens for everybody, let's get rid of touch screens, right? Or let's figure out how much adding a touch screen would cost. Maybe we figure out for people out in the field, for example, let's say you have field offices where you have employees that require a lot of mobility. Let's say instead of a full laptop and a full durable laptop that they're bringing with them on their vans, we switch it to a extremely durable touchscreen tablet with an attachable keyboard that still allows for the speed and efficiency of a full laptop. What's that going to do to my pricing? Right? So you're able to unlock the components of the cost from these suppliers by asking your partners to create these different scenarios for you. And so that you can say, all right, if I tweak these different things here, I'm getting the best value for what I'm paying because I understand the different costs that are going into these products and these solutions. The next piece here is to understand that negotiations repeat themselves. They're not a single event. You may negotiate something now, but you're going to be negotiating that same thing unless the need for that eliminates itself entirely over the term of the agreement. So you need to structure it in a way that says, how can we renew this with the same discount, same parameters, if it makes sense? Or how can we function for this negotiation that sets us up better for the next one? Maybe we build in price caps that say you can't increase my price more than 3%, or in relation to the CPI index, you can't increase, we won't decrease our quantity over the next few years or whatever, if you agree to extend our discount upon renewal. So there are a lot of things that you need to think about as you're negotiating that leads you to have a better negotiation the next time around. And this doesn't even have to be directly in the contract. It can also be within conditioning the supplier, meaning it could be into getting them to think a certain way as you complete the negotiation. So for example, you could condition a supplier that says, hey, I didn't like how this negotiation went. We're going to be looking for alternatives in the future. I'm going to be doing a one-year contract with you. And when I come back around, you'll be participating in RFP and we might be moving our business elsewhere. So that means you didn't just negotiate in with that and close it out. You conditioned them to say, hey, work on my account the best you can. Put your best foot forward. Bring me innovative solutions that are going to make me consider staying as a client of yours, and that I'll be in a position to renew the contract with you instead of moving the business elsewhere. These are things that your partner should understand and that they should be communicating to the supplier for you so that you don't have to, one, have those hard conversations and you're not missing the details, but then they're also utilizing their industry knowledge to deliver that message in the best way. Because you could say, hey, we're going to be looking at other solutions, but your partner, as you're communicating these things, could say, hey, let's take storage as a quick example, right? Let's take physical storage of data versus cloud storage. You could be having a conversation, your partner rather, could have that conversation with your storage provider that you're currently having at physical locations and say, hey, provider, unless you bring us different solutions, here are all the specs that they're getting because we worked with them, we've talked to the right people in the organization, we understand the industry. We could tell them that they could save more money by going with AWS versus a SunGuard company or something like that, right? We could tell them, and your partners can communicate that message with information, market data that really supports it, and it's not just a bluff. So all of that leads to don't just negotiate the price, negotiate the value, which is really a summation, of some of the things that I said before in terms of you have to unlock not just the pricing transparency, but the value transparency. What can you get done with the supplier solution better or at least par to what you came in with your same set of goals? And the last box here is talking about the buying process. Often in these negotiations, you might have a partner that comes back and says, we couldn't get you a discount at your current purchasing level, but if you buy more, you'll save more money. Sometimes this makes sense. Sometimes it's just the tactic that the supplier is using to increase their revenue, increase their relationship with you and their hold on you, and you don't need to buy more. Don't buy more for the sake of buying more, but do buy more if it contributes to your long-term plan and your growth plan. What this means is that you can find opportunities for bundling. So if we're going back to the previous example that we used around HP software, laptops, hardware, whatever, you may walk into that and say, hey, I'm tasked with purchasing 50,000 units from HP. Now they say, well, if you purchased 10,000 more, you would get into our next tier customer. You're like, well, I don't need 10,000 more units right now. But you might need 10,000, or you might need that same equal amount of spend in another category. So maybe you don't need 10,000 more units of laptops and tablets, but you also need more printers. You need more security. You need more something else that you can bundle in with that supplier that changes them from a standard supplier to a strategic partner, and let your partner or third-party partner facilitate that transaction for you by helping you understand their full service of offerings and your needs and wants, right? So if the buy more, save more tactic actually makes sense, do it, but don't do it for the sake of doing it. You have to look holistically around the organization and say, I'm not just doing this in this one category, I'm doing it across categories. The next thing is coordinate purchases with other key projects through departmental collaboration. The marketing department needs one thing, the product development department needs one thing. How can we coordinate this so that, one, we're not double purchasing anything? We don't want to purchase the same thing because we had poor visibility between departments. But the next thing is, how do we couple these things together strategically that says, this is all under one MSA, we have full visibility into it, And by bundling and coordinating these purchases and the timing of these purchases, we've not only saved time and efficiency with our procurement department, but we've also saved money in the long run. Let's move on to the case study. We have about 13 minutes left, and I also want to make sure I'm leaving time for questions. So 4 parts of this Microsoft case study. I don't have all the specific examples because I don't want to share too much of the client details, but I will tell you a little bit about Microsoft. The fiscal year for Microsoft ends on June 30th. And if you know anything about fiscal years with an organization, it really helps you with discounts for your contract, right? So if you're at the end of the fiscal year, there might be certain sales reps within Microsoft that say, I need to close this out before June 30th. There's going to be a lot of contracts that are ending around that time because a lot of people take this strategy, right? So like, let's say, for example, you go back and say, we're starting early, utilizing one of the tips that I gave, and you're starting in August, right? So you have almost a full year to do this negotiation. And Microsoft says to you, hey, a lot of our clients are ending their contracts around June 30th, right? So that may be strategic for their other clients, right? They're saying, I want those end of your fiscal year discounts, but then Microsoft may tell you, we'll give you a slight discount if you have your contract start from January to December. They'll do this for 2 reasons, right? One, they'll be able to capture multi-year budgets, right? So it may be something where it says, hey, we're budgeted for Microsoft in 2 years now because of the timing of our contract. Or they may be able to reduce the strain on their own sales department with having to do so many renewals around the same time, right? So by starting early, you give yourself transparency into their pricing, once again, that says, all right, well, what's the discount that you'll give me if I start, the contract January to December, right? We may have to prorate a certain number of things. We may have to work around the numbers to make sure it makes sense, but it may be a good discount. But there also may be the discount in waiting until their fiscal year end. So there are those 2 different things that you need to make sure that you work out for your particular situations. The next thing is products and value. Most of the time, Microsoft will aim to sell you Azure and E5 licenses. I put a note down on the bottom. If you're not in the IT field and you want to understand a little bit more about what this means, Office 365 E5 is a cloud-based suite of productivity apps combined with advanced voice analytics, security, and compliance services. So when you think about your Word, your Excel, your PowerPoint, those things, that's one part of it, but then it also has voice capabilities, enterprise analytics capabilities. It has software modules that keep your company safe. So it has way more than just those simple suite of products that we're all familiar with and probably use every day. The reason they want to move you up to that is, imagine that you're using, I'm on PowerPoint right now, right? So we're using that, but they want to increase their business with you. So they want to make sure that you have a little bit more dependency on them and a little bit more consistency across the organization. And obviously it's going to cost a lot more, but it will give you more. And then Azure is a public cloud computing platform with solutions including infrastructure, software as a service, and they can be used for such services as analytics, virtual computing, storage, networking, and much more. It's pretty much something that is a really good addition to Office 365. If you're all under one thing, they talk to each other very well. So from Microsoft's standpoint, they're giving a lot of value, right? They're telling you that for this one package, if you add these 2 things, you're going to have everything you need for your employees to do the right things, right? But at the same time, you need to figure out if this is what your company needs to do. So in my particular situation with this case study, we have to figure out, here are all the things that we're going to be using under these licenses. We understood our footprint. We understood what's already been deployed, what was already under use, who was our current cloud provider, how much we were paying for that. We already had those analytics before we walked into that conversation, that negotiation, and we already understood what Microsoft would want to offer us. So for us, it had to be a value proposition that said, we know what we're paying for all these things that you're offering us. It's not currently under your umbrella. How can we make sure that we're getting the best value out of this? For us, once we completed that pricing analysis, it made sense to move a lot on over to some of these products under Microsoft, but then at the same time, we had to pay certain amounts of attention to the types of licenses because certain things could not go. There were certain roadblocks that would stop the organization from making those changes. The next thing is, a big piece of advice is that when you think about And this can be related to any sort of supplier that does this, right? Microsoft has all of these different products, right? They have their Office 365, and then they have all of those voice, analytics, security, compliance solutions and services that fall under different things. And as we were negotiating with them, they steered the negotiation to focus on the Office 365 piece. So really just their core suite of products. And when we talked about price caps, they agreed to a price cap. But one of the things that they did next was they said, we can only agree to a price cap on this one piece, right? So they said, we'll cap it by 3%. But what made more sense to us is say, hey, we're willing to say cap it by 5% if you're willing to cap everything instead of just this one thing. And now that can be a very good example for any negotiation that you do where there are multiple services or components or solutions that you're buying into one package. Do the analysis that says what makes more sense to cap. Can we cap the whole thing and not just a piece of it? And then ensure the right affiliate language is in place to allow for the proper company usage. Let's say, for your example, your company with multiple organizations and divisions all under one umbrella, make sure that you're buying something that everyone can use. So for example, my particular company, CoreCentric, we have tons of little companies that the parent company has purchased. When we do a software deal, we say, hey, we're going from top down and not specific to one group where it makes sense at. The next piece here is the contracting and licensing. Most of the time, if you're transitioning from a perpetual agreement to an Office 365 contract, that's going to yield you the highest price discount for that transition, right? So you get that one chance to say, hey, I'm on perpetual right now. Let's move that over to an Office 365. Just a little tip of advice. And then the next piece here is ensure that the partners can present the best license option for your specific use cases. Not everybody needs everything. Not everybody needs, the full suite of products, but some people do, and you need to figure that out. And your partner should be able to help you understand your current infrastructure footprint and help you guide you through that process. And then that really leads to the next piece is identifying all active contracts and deployments. It's simply an extension of, hey, know your footprint before you go into the conversation so that you can adequately move on to the next licensing deal here. Savings, my experience says that you should aim for at least 20% on the low end, 50% on the high end, and then I would say 65%, you're pretty much in a golden space if we're talking about reductions from list price, not necessarily reductions from your previous payment cost. And then costs primarily come from the E5 licenses and not necessarily ancillary products. And what this means is that's going to be your most expensive thing. That is going to be the piece that you're most likely, for the Microsoft case study that we're looking at, going to be able to discount. If you do have an E5, and I've done a number of these, if you have the E5, that's the one that they're going to say they're willing to apply a discount on. So that means all the ancillary products, all the other add-ons that you're having, if you can, keep it to a minimum, only do what you need in that category, get everything you want on the E5 side because you can discount it, but nothing else can be discounted typically. And this leads to a lower spend and higher utilization overall. You have a few minutes left. I'm going to say closing out with this is that you need to be sure to measure the outcome. Right? So when we look at something like this and utilizing a third party, right, don't just look at what you saved in that one contract negotiation that 1 year. That may be how you measure it for your department, but you want to understand the long-term value, and we're talking 5 to 10 years here, that you were able to achieve with this new agreement, right? In certain situations, you might not have any savings the first year, but you might have savings over the course of 5 years. You might say, hey, we're paying more to do the implementation, the development, the transition that first year, but right after that, costs are going to really slide downhill. And then you need to determine the impact to efficiency. So you may have gone through all of this, and maybe you did pay a fee to utilize that third-party partner to help you through this negotiation, but the outcome is that you gained a lot more visibility into not only the pricing structure of these suppliers, but to the visibility of your licenses and deployment needs. You understand more about your own organization, what your needs are, and how to move that roadmap into the future. And then you've also identified gaps in the current solution that you can then address proactively instead of reactively. You can start looking at things and saying, we did the analysis, the partner helped us understand more. How can we get a jump on this so that we can start these negotiations early in the future and start moving? And then the next thing is you're audit ready at this point, right? You've already understood what's all under your roadmap, what you're using, who's using it, all across the organization, what you're under contract for. So there are companies out there that have strict compliance standards that say, hey, we're Adobe, don't share our password with other people. How do you make sure that you're not doing that? You have visibility now. And then you're ensuring that you're only utilizing solutions that have been purchased. So I know that was a lot. I'm so sorry. But yeah, that was just a ton of it. But yeah, I am open for questions. Kathy, I know that we only have a couple of minutes here. But yeah, do we want to kind of open that up?
Sure, definitely. We do have one question from George. It says an ethical problem from earlier in the presentation. You shouldn't include an incumbent in a bid process unless they have a solid, legitimate opportunity to be reselected. To just include them as a benchmark is unethical. Do you
Yes.
want to respond?
Yep, and I do want to respond because I totally understand that. So as a consultant, I've worked with a ton of companies out there that do this. You know, one of the things that they do is they'll say, hey, I want to include my incumbent in, and we hate them, and we're not going to select them. My personal opinion is I always steer them away. If you don't want to select them, don't include them. However, I always ask the question to my clients and I say, if they can present a legitimate change and they have a legitimate chance, even if it's a small chance of winning, is that possible? Should we include them? To me, if the answer is yes and the chance is small, I would still go ahead and include them. A lot of the time, what ends up happening in certain situations is that suppliers who are the incumbent that don't get the chance participating in an RFP where the business is taken away from them, they often feel worse than if they participate and then they're not selected. But George, I do totally agree with you. Don't include anybody if there's zero chance of them being selected. But if there's a small chance, just the smallest, I would say, throw them in there. But I'm also extremely transparent as a negotiator, extremely transparent. If it's me and I'm walking into a conversation with an incumbent, I might say, you have a very low chance of winning. They don't like you guys. I'm that transparent. I might use nicer words and I might be a lot more careful with my words, but I will say that and I will give them the option and opportunity that says, if you don't want to participate, we'll understand. I will say, hey, take a look at the RFP that we're about to send out. If you're looking at it, you're understanding our requirements and our needs, and then you look at that and say, hey, you guys are actually using the wrong thing for what we offer. We have a totally different solution for you. Let us try. To me, that's better news because all of a sudden they could understand the pain points better than what the company could communicate to them before. So I know I'm rambling with that one a little bit, but I just want to say, George, thank you for that question. It's something I run into all the time, and there's a lot of different ways to handle it. But one of the things that we want to make sure is that we're not being unethical in the process that we're going through.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you, Brandon, for the presentation. You have so much information in this program. It's fantastic. And thank you for that. I want to let everybody know that you will be getting a copy of the recording. So if you want to look back and review some of the information we went over today, please use that as well. And we will be giving you also the PDF for today's presentation as well. So look for an email from me later today, and it will also have your continuing education credit for today's program.